Okay, I want to start today with a number. 29.61 seconds.
That's incredibly precise.
It is. And I want you to just, hold that number, let's call it 30 seconds in your head.
Yeah.
Because by the end of this deep dive, I think that number is going to explain a whole lot about why a 7-year-old with a speech delay might struggle to get the care they need.
A small number, but it sounds like it has some pretty massive implications.
It really does. What we're looking at today is a collision. It's like a head-on crash between two worlds that speak completely different languages.
Okay, so what's on one side of the crash?
On one side, you have the biological reality of a child's brain, how it focuses, how it learns, and, more importantly, how it gets tired.
And on the other side?
The other side is the invisible machine of American healthcare. The spreadsheets, the committees, the algorithms, all the stuff that decides what that child's care is actually worth.
Right, and usually those two things, neuroscience and medical billing, they just never meet.
Never. They stay in their own lanes. But we've pulled together a stack of sources that, well, they basically force them in the same room. We've got these really technical papers on something called the RUC and Medicare valuation.
Yeah, this is the heavy stuff. We're talking about work from Quinton, LaHaye, Bad, very dense.
I mean, honestly, reading the titles alone usually puts me to sleep, but this time it was different.
Because you pair it with the other side of a story, the neuroscience. We're looking at studies on attention from Simon and Swades-Gonzalez and therapy studies from Benavides.
So that's the mission for today, to figure out what happens when the billing system demands a commodity time that a child's brain, well, literally can't provide.
So where do we start? With the brain or with the billing?
Let's start with the money, because, frankly, before digging into this, I had no idea how any of this worked. I just thought a doctor sends a bill and an insurance company, pays it.
If only.
Yeah.
That would be a lemonade stand economy. American healthcare is just a little more complicated.
So walk me through it. I take my kid to a speech-language pathologist, an SLP. I give them my insurance card. How does the system decide that session is worth $80, but a flu shot is worth $20? Who's doing the math?
Okay, so it all comes down to a single concept, the RVU.
RVU?
Relative value unit.
Sounds like something from a science fiction movie. I'll trade you 5 RVUs for that spaceship part.
It's not far off, actually. It's basically the universal currency of healthcare.
Yeah.
It was created back in the late 80s to try and standardize payments. The idea was that every single thing a doctor does, from a simple checkup to complex brain surgery, gets assigned a point value, an RVU score.
Okay, so what goes into that score? Is it just how much time the doctor spends with you?
Time is a huge piece of it, but it's not the whole story. The review by Bad and his colleagues breaks it down into 3 parts, and this is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
The biggest piece, about 52% of the value, is what they call the physician work RVU.
Physician work? That sounds a little vague.
It is and it isn't. It measures the time, yes. But it also tries to measure the technical skill needed, the mental effort, and even the psychological stress of the procedure.
So high stress, high skill, like brain surgery.
Get a ton of work RVUs, exactly. Then part 2 is practice expense, PE. That's about 44%.
And that's the overhead, the rent, the staff, the lights.
Yep, rent, equipment, salaries for the front desk, all of that.
Okay, so we have work, we have rent. What's the last little bit?
The last slice, just about 4%, is for malpractice insurance, the PLI.
So you add up the work, the practice expense, and the insurance, and that gives you your final RVU score.
That's your score. Then Congress sets what's called a conversion factor, basically a dollar amount per point. You multiply your RVUs by that number, and that's the check you get from Medicare. And since most private insurance bases their rates on Medicare, that's pretty much the check you get from everyone.
It seems surprisingly logical. A bit complicated, but it's a formula. It feels objective.
The formula itself is objective. The inputs to the formula, well, that's where the drama comes in.
What do you mean?
Well, who decides? Who decides a speech therapy session is worth, say, 0.8 RVUs and a knee replacement is worth 20? Who is actually inputting those variables for skill and time and stress?
I always assumed it was, I don't know, some government agency. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS.
Not directly. It's actually a committee. A very powerful, very quiet committee called the RUC, the Relative Value Scale Update Committee.
The RUC. It sounds like a secret club.
It's not secret, but it is incredibly influential. According to Quinton, it's a group of 31 or 32 people, mostly specialist physicians, and they're convened by the American Medical Association.
Wait, by the AMA, not the government.
Right. They meet a few times a year, they review all these medical codes, and then they make recommendations to CMS about what the value should be.
Okay, but recommendations, that's the key word, right? CMS, the government, can just say no.
They can. But the research from both Quinton and Leahy shows that historically, CMS accepts the RUC's recommendations more than 90% of the time.
So, for all intents and purposes, this private committee of doctors is setting the price for almost every medical procedure in the country.
That's the reality.
That is just a staggering amount of power. So here's the obvious question. If it's a committee of doctors, why don't they just, vote to raise the value of everything? Why aren't they just printing money for themselves?
Because they can't. And this is the absolute key to the whole puzzle. And it's from that Leahy paper. The entire system is what they call a zero-sum game.
Is that this budget neutrality thing I read about?
Precisely. Congress sets a fixed pie, a total budget for physician payments.
Mm-hmm.
That pie does not get bigger just because the RUC thinks a procedure is harder this year.
Oh, okay.
So if the RUC decides that, say, primary care doctors need a raise for their office visits.
Which we hear all the time. Sounds like a good thing.
It is, in a vacuum. But under budget neutrality, to pay for that raise, the money has to be taken from somewhere else.
It's seesaw.
The seesaw. If evaluation and management codes go up, procedural codes, things like surgery or, for our conversation, therapy often have to go down to balance the budget.
So it's basically a cage match between medical specialties. For me to get paid more, you have to get paid less.
That's a pretty good way to put it. And this whole structure, this whole system, it creates a real disadvantage for certain groups. And specifically, it disadvantages pediatrics.
Wait, why? That seems counterintuitive. I mean, I have kids. Getting them to cooperate for anything it's work. You'd think treating a child who's scared or can't sit still would get more intensity points, not less.
You would think.
Yeah.
But you have to remember how the RUC makes these decisions. It's not just a philosophical debate. They rely heavily on surveys sent to doctors.
Okay, so they ask them, how long does this take? How hard is it?
Right. And as Quinton points out, that's already a black box because it's all self-reported, which is prone to bias. But the bigger problem is the vignette.
The vignette.
When they value a code, they create a little story, a vignette, of a typical patient to make sure everyone is rating the same thing.
I see. So imagine you are treating a patient with X.
Exactly. But the entire RUC system is built on Medicare data. So who is the typical patient in the Medicare system?
An elderly person, someone over 65.
Right. So the benchmark, the default patient for judging time and intensity is almost always an adult. Pediatric-specific issues just don't have the volume of data in the Medicare system to create a separate, reliable benchmark.
So a pediatric specialist's work is being valued against the difficulty of treating a compliant 70-year-old, not a squirming 7-year-old.
That's the fundamental flaw. And it leads to what these papers call a misvaluation of time. All that extra work, the behavior management, calming a child down, talking to the parents, turning therapy into a game.
All of that is invisible.
It's invisible to the spreadsheet. To the RUC, 15 minutes is 15 minutes.
And this is where the two worlds start to collide, isn't it? Because treating a child isn't just treating a small adult. Their brains are different.
Totally different. Which brings us back to that number you started with.
29.61 seconds.
This is where we pivot from the boardroom to the brain, from finance to neuroscience.
Yeah, we've got this incredible paper by Simon and colleagues that introduces a concept they call A-span. Now, we've all heard of attention span. Is this just a fancier way of saying that?
It's much more precise. Attention span is kind of a fuzzy, casual term.
Yeah.
A-span, as Simon's team defines it, is the maximum amount of time you can stay in an optimal, in-the-zone state.
In the zone, like an athlete.
It's a similar idea. It means you're operating at peak performance, high accuracy, consistent reaction time. You're not making mistakes. You're not drifting off. You are locked in.
And how do they even measure that?
They use something called a continuous performance task. It's a standard psych test. You sit in front of a computer, and you have to do this really boring, repetitive task, like press a button every time you see the letter X, but not when you see the letter K.
Sounds tedious.
It's designed to be tedious. The whole point is to stress test your focus and see how long you can maintain that perfect performance before you start to slip.
An endurance test for the brain. So they had adults do this and kids.
Exactly. They compared young adults to children between the ages of 7 and 13. And for the adults, the average A-span, that in-the-zone time, was about 76 seconds.
Wait, that's it? Just over a minute? That feels really short. I feel like I can focus longer than that.
Well, it's a humbling number, isn't it? We all think we can focus for hours, but that peak, locked-in state is fleeting. But now compare that 76 seconds to the kids.
Okay.
Children in the study. Their average A-span was just 29.61 seconds.
Wow. Less than half.
Not even half. Less than 30 seconds of that optimal neuroplastic learning-ready state before their performance starts to slide.
But surely they can recover, right? It's not like after 30 seconds their brain just shuts off.
No, it doesn't shut off. But this is where the Simon paper finds something even more important. They call it the decrement.
The decrement.
Yeah, and this is crucial for our whole conversation about billing. It's the rate of decay.
Yeah.
What the study showed was that over the course of the task, the child's ability to maintain attention dropped by almost 30%. 27.41 to be exact.
So they start with a smaller gas tank, and their engine burns through that fuel almost 30% faster than an adult's.
That is a perfect analogy. The adults in the study, they stayed stable. Their performance didn't really collapse over time. The kids crashed.
And other research confirms this.
It does. The Swaits-Gonzalez paper looked at this in primary school kids and found the exact same pattern. Younger children, and especially kids with ADHD symptoms, showed much, much steeper drops in performance the longer a task dragged on.
So, biologically, a child's brain is built for what? Short bursts of high intensity.
Bursts. That is the biological reality.
Okay, so now let's drag the machine, the RUC, the RVUs, the billing codes back into the room. How does a system built around steady, predictable blocks of time handle a biological reality that's built on these short, intense bursts?
Badly. Very badly. And that is the absolute core of this conflict. The billing system rewards endurance. It loves timed codes. 50-minute increments, 30-minute slots.
Because in the adult world that it's based on, longer usually means more work was done.
Right. But we just established that the kid you're treating has, what, 29 seconds of trying time?
So what does that mean in a real therapy session?
Well, let's look at the source from Medicare. It looked at the most effective way to treat speech sound disorders. This is like the bread and butter of pediatric speech therapy, teaching a kid how to say a sound correctly.
And what works best?
The paper found it was short duration, high intensity. Basically drilling.
Yeah.
Rapid fire practice. You get the child in, you do intense work while they are in that in-the-zone A-span window, and then you stop.
Because if you keep pushing past that window,
You hit what Simon's team would call the empty minutes. The child is physically there, but their brain is out of the zone. If you're trying to stretch a session to 30 or 45 minutes just to meet a billing requirement, you are literally fighting their biology.
so the speech-language pathologist is caught. It's a biological problem, but it's also a financial one.
And an ethical one. I mean, imagine you're that therapist. You know from the research that 10 minutes of intense drilling is the most effective treatment for this specific child.
Right. It's the right thing to do.
But the billing code, which was valued by the RUC based on their adult vignette, might say you have to provide a minimum of 30 minutes of therapy to even submit a claim.
So you have to choose.
You have two bad choices. Choice A. You force the child to sit there for another 20 minutes. You fill the empty minutes.
Which just leads to frustration for everyone. The kid gets antsy, you get stressed, you're billing for time, but no real therapy is happening.
Exactly. You're satisfying the spreadsheet, but not helping the child. Or
Yeah.
there's choice B.
You do the right thing clinically. The short, intense burst.
But then you can't bill the full code. Your revenue plummets. And under budget neutrality, where every specialty is fighting for a piece of that fixed pie, your practice slowly becomes financially unviable.
You can't pay your rent, you can't keep the lights on, and if you close your practice,
Then kids in your area lose access to care. And that's the real fear here, that this mismatch will just make it impossible for pediatric practices to survive, especially if they take insurance. They'll be forced to stop seeing kids and only see adults, where the biology and the billing codes actually line up.
it's incredible. We've built a reimbursement system that rewards endurance, sitting still longer, but the actual developmental science says the value isn't in endurance, it's in intensity.
We're measuring the wrong thing. We're measuring the container, the minutes on the clock, instead of the content, the actual neural change happening in the child's brain.
And it all comes back to that typical patient. The RUC is imagining a patient who can sit for 45 minutes and do steady work.
Exactly. A 60-year-old recovering from knee surgery. 45 minutes of physical therapy makes perfect biological sense. Their A-span is stable. A 7-year-old with a language disorder.
45 minutes is a biological fantasy.
But the billing code doesn't have a checkbox for biological fantasy. It just has a box for time.
So is there any movement on this? Is anyone pointing this out to the RUC?
Well, these papers we're discussing, they're part of that movement. Quinton and Lee are effectively sounding the alarm, saying that this methodology systematically undervalues the care of children.
But to fix it, you'd have to fight that zero-sum game.
And that's the mountain to climb. If you want to say, okay, 15 minutes of intense pediatric therapy is worth the same as 45 minutes of adult therapy, that extra money has to come out of someone else's pocket.
The surgeons, the radiologists.
The cardiologists, all the people who have a lot of seats on that committee. So it's a political battle just as much as it's a scientific one.
This whole deep dive it's really opened my eyes. We think of healthcare as this service, but you peel back one layer and you see it's this incredibly complex competitive system governed by a spreadsheet that just doesn't understand how a kid's brain works.
It really shows that the word value means different things to different people. To a parent, value is, can my child communicate now? To the RUC, value is, how much work was done over X units of time? And those are just not the same questions.
So let's just quickly recap the storm we've walked through today.
Okay, we started with the machine, the RVU, the RUC, and that typical patient problem that basically ignores children.
Then we dove into the biology. We defined ACE span, that tiny 29-second window of peak focus in kids. And the decrement, the fact that their focus crashes almost 30% faster than in adults.
And finally, we saw the collision. The science says therapy works best in short, intense bursts,
but the billing system demands long, steady blocks of time,
which leaves therapists in an impossible position. Do what's best for the child, or do what's necessary to keep their practice open.
And it leaves us with a pretty profound question, I think.
It does. I mean, the question isn't just about money or SLPs. It's about the very design of our system. We have built a healthcare economy that is obsessed with the clock. Duration has become our proxy for value.
More time must mean more care.
But neuroscience couldn't care less about a clock. In child development, all the science we have shows that value comes from intensity, not duration. It comes from that spark.
Right.
So the question I'm left with is, are we willing to redesign the math of healthcare to fit the biology of a child? Or are we just going to keep trying to force the child to fit the spreadsheet?
That is a question that needs an answer. And hopefully someone takes a stopwatch set to 29 seconds into the next one of those REC meetings.
Let's hope so.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you on the next one.